So hi everyone, in this presentation I'm going to discuss and provide advice on how to report the results of an NMA in a systematic review. So firstly, I'll highlight the importance of following the PRISMA checklist for NMAs, which is available on the PRISMA website. It was published in 2015 and gives guidance for reporting systematic reviews, which include a network meta-analysis. It follows the same format as the other available checklists on the PRISMA website. The checklist includes 32 checklist items categorized by the section of the review, such as the title and the abstract, and a column which allows the user to add the page number of where the checklist item is reported. The checklist includes 5 new items as well as 11 modifications to items already included in the original checklist. For many journals, it is mandatory to submit a PRISMA checklist with your submission. The first items in the checklist address the title and objectives section of the review, and these should align with your protocol. The title needs to state that it is a network meta-analysis. There should be a rationale for why you are conducting a network meta-analysis rather than just conducting a simple pairwise meta-analysis. The method section should align with your protocol, so I won't go into too much detail here, as this was covered in the first week of this course about writing an NMA protocol. There are 14 items to address in the method section, which will have already been written as part of your protocol. It's important that any changes between the protocol and the review are documented and justified. In the PRISMA checklist, there are 10 items relating to the results section. The first is about study selection and is the same as with a standard systematic review, where a flow diagram is presented and the number of studies screened, data extracted, and included in the review are described, along with any reasons for excluding studies at each stage. The next items are regarding the network structure. The first is about presenting a graph of the treatment network, and the next is about narratively summarizing the network, such as explaining any gaps in the network. As described in previous lectures, commonly review authors will show which treatments have been compared using a network plot. So as a recap, here are some examples of a network plot from the review looking at immunomodulators and immunosuppressants for progressive multiple sclerosis. A network plot is presented for each outcome because different studies and treatments are included in each one, depending on what each study measured. Another way to present the network structure is to use a table. Here is an example which is from the Cochrane Handbook, Chapter 11. Each row shows how many studies have directly compared the treatments highlighted in the grey boxes. In network meta-analysis with many different comparisons, these tables could become very large. Finally, another way to present the network structure is to use a contribution matrix. This is an example again from the Cochrane Handbook, Chapter 11. There are 4 interventions included in this matrix, which are listed here on the left. The 4 direct comparisons in the network are presented at the top of the table, and their contributions to the NMA estimates are presented as percentage weights. The NMA estimates can either be mixed estimates from both direct and indirect evidence, or they can be from the indirect estimates only, where no direct comparison exists. This is a nice way of showing how much direct evidence contributes to each NMA estimate. However, like with the table for the network structure, these could become quite long and complex with many different treatments. The next item in the PRISMA checklist for NMAs refers to the study characteristics, therefore explaining the PICO, the sample size, follow-up time points, etc. Review authors also should present a summary of the risk of bias assessments for each study or each outcome, depending on which tool was used. So when it comes to presenting the results from an NMA, it can be more difficult to summarize them in one figure, which is usually how it's done with a pairwise meta-analysis. There are many ways NMA results can be presented. It's important, as with any systematic review, that they are presented in a logical way within the text, and the use of figures and tables is highly encouraged. However, there is no recommendations on the exact figures that review authors should use, and currently NMA reviews do vary in the way that they present their results. One common way to present the results is to use league tables of the summary statistics. So here is an example of a league table from the Cochrane review assessing systemic pharmacological treatments for chronic plaque psoriasis. So this league table shows the results from 2 NMAs. The top half shows the results from the outcome quality of life, while the bottom half shows the results from the outcome PGA, which stands for Physician Global Assessment of Psoriasis. So for example, here, this result shows the NMA estimate for quality of life when comparing treatments, ATA versus SM. While this result is the NMA estimate for the outcome PGA when comparing treatments SM and CSA. League tables can differ in what they present. So this example shows NMA estimates for 2 outcomes. Some league tables will only show 1 outcome and will present the estimates from the direct comparisons in the top right-hand corner and the NMA estimates in the bottom left-hand corner. A forest plot can also be used to present the results, as with a pairwise meta-analysis. But instead of showing the direct comparisons per study, they show the NMA estimates for each treatment when compared to a comparator. So here are 2 forest plots from the same review on psoriasis. Physician Global Assessment of Psoriasis is shown on the left forest plot, and quality of life is shown on the right. Each intervention here is compared against placebo. Both of these forest plots show the treatments ordered by the size of the risk ratio or the standardized mean difference. This helps readers see which treatments are the most and least effective. The next item refers to the assessment of inconsistency. Results from any statistical tests for both local and global approaches should be narratively described. Here is an example from the review Immunomodulators and Immunosuppressants for Progressive Multiple Sclerosis, where the authors explain the results from the assessment of inconsistency, or here they call it incoherence. They refer to both the global and local assessments. As well as a narrative description of the results, review authors may also want to show the statistics in a table or the output from the statistical software. From the same review, here are the results from the local approach, where they show the assessment of incoherence in one of the loops for the outcome serious adverse events. This approach is called the loop-specific approach. The authors of this review have also performed a node-splitting approach, and the results are shown in this table. In addition, the authors have also presented at the bottom of this table the global test results via the design by treatment approach. Here is another example of how to show the results from the assessment of inconsistency. This is from the review assessing topical anti-inflammatory treatments for eczema. Each comparator in the NMA, they show the difference between the NMA effect, direct effect, and the indirect effect, and the results from the assessment of inconsistency are shown, with the Z and P values from the statistical test. Next in the PRISMA checklist is an item regarding the presentation of the risk of bias assessments across the studies. This also applies to reviews without an NMA. The final Prisma item in the results section is regarding any additional analysis conducted. This could include reporting results of ranking statistics, such as SUCRA. Here is a graph showing a ranking plot from the SUCRA values. This is from the Cochrane Review's Systemic Pharmacological Treatments for Chronic Plaque Psoriasis. On the x-axis is the outcome PASI 90, and on the y-axis is serious adverse events. An optimal treatment should be categorized by high efficacy and acceptability. Therefore, it would appear in the right upper corner of this graph. This review also shows the rankings in a table, showing the SUCRA value and rank for each treatment per outcome. Other additional analysis could include results from subgroup and sensitivity analysis, or from exploring publication bias and the production of comparison-adjusted funnel plots. In Cochrane intervention reviews, it is mandatory to present summary of findings tables, but this is not addressed in the Prisma checklist for NMAs. The structure of summary of findings tables is well known within the Cochrane community, and its structure is established for reviews including pairwise meta-analysis. For reviews including network meta-analysis, the format is different. They are usually created for each outcome, with the treatments listed in each row, and a common comparator is used, such as placebo or a standard treatment. However, they can be challenging when there are lots of treatments in the network. The handbook recommends pre-specifying in the protocol which treatments are going to be included in the SOF tables, and these should be the most important ones for clinical practice. The SOF tables can also include ranking statistics alongside the network estimates. They should also include grade or cinema assessments of the confidence in the evidence. In 2019, a paper was published from the grade working group in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology. It provided advice on the structure of summary of findings tables for an NMA. Included in the paper is an example of how a summary of findings table could appear. The top section of the table is similar to what is usually presented in a standard summary of findings table. It is a description of the PICO, so the population, the interventions included, the comparator, the outcome, and the setting. The difference here is that the table includes multiple interventions and only one outcome, where usually a summary of findings table showing a pairwise meta-analysis would only have one intervention and multiple outcomes. At the top of the table is also a network diagram for this outcome. In this example, the treatments are listed in the left-hand column and color-coded in line with the network diagram. Under each treatment, there is a description of whether there was only direct evidence. If there was direct evidence, then the number of RCTs and participants would be given. In the next columns are the relative effect from the NMA, along with the anticipated absolute effects with and without the intervention, and the difference between these. The confidence assessments from grade are also given, along with the reasons for downgrading. In addition, the ranking statistics are given, along with a credible interval. Finally, a column is shown for the interpretation of the findings based on the NMA estimate and the certainty of evidence. So unfortunately, the use of bright colors and the inclusion of the network diagram within the table is currently not possible within RevMan and GradePro software, which are used to develop SOF tables. But this could be created in a different software and imported into RevMan. So here is a real-life example of an SOF table. Here the authors have used external software to create their SOF table. The treatments are compared against placebo, and they're ordered by the ranking statistic, the p-score. For the discussion section of an NMA review, there are 3 Prisma items. The first is to summarize the evidence, and this should be mainly based on what is reported in the summary of findings table. Any limitations should be noted, including the validity of the transitivity assumption. Finally, a conclusion section is required, which is similar to any other kind of systematic review, providing a general interpretation of the results in the context of other evidence and the implications for future research. There is also a PRISMA item on describing funding, resources, and support for the systematic review, and this should always be included in any type of research. PRISMA for NMAs also provides an item on the abstract, which is actually number 2 in the checklist. However, I'm discussing this one at the end of this talk because the abstract is usually the last section a review author would write. The abstract of an NMA should follow the same structure to any other kind of systematic review, where there is a background, methods, results, and discussion and conclusions section. The source of funding and registration number should also be included here. In the results section, a short summary of the main findings from the NMA should be included. This is usually what is presented in the summary of findings tables. Some reviews focus on the rankings, but there should be caution when interpreting these. The effect estimate should always be given with the 95% confidence interval or credible intervals. It's also important to provide the certainty of evidence along with the effect estimates and use these to develop the language used to describe the results.